Hello, Voidlings and Vagabonds. My name is TB Skyn, and yeah, we're gonna have to do this again. We're gonna have to talk some more about Kai'Sa. And the reason we're talking some more about Kai'Sa is because, well, Riot has been talking a bit more about Kai'Sa. They got a question in one of their recent developer updates asking why Kai'Sa has this unnecessarily deep neckline when Riot has publicly stated that they didn't want to sexualize characters unless it made sense for the specific character, like Ahri or Evelyn. And Reeve, the lead producer of Champions, went in to say this: "We'll be the first to admit that Kai'Sa's neckline didn't land well with players and that it made her look unnecessarily sexualized, even if that wasn't the intention. From the beginning of her development, we wanted Kai'Sa to be a regular human who survived the Void by coexisting with a Void creature, not someone who escaped but was corrupted by the experience. We felt that this was what made her unique in the Void champion lineup, and plus, we'd recently made a corruption-themed champion with Kayn. For these reasons, it was really important for us to make sure that Kai'Sa looked like a human wearing a Void suit rather than a monstrosity created by the Void. Early on, Kai'Sa didn't have a deep neckline. When we got her in-game, we realized her dark hair combined with a suit made her look more Void creature or corrupted human than normal person wearing a Void suit, particularly because the human skin showing on her face was a small on-screen and difficult to read from the in-game camera. Our artists tried a few things to try and address this, and the one that worked well was designing her neckline so that you could see her human skin more clearly when her mask was off. With this change, more playtesters interpreted Kai'Sa as being a human wearing a suit rather than a human who was corrupted. In retrospect, we recognize we should have prioritized searching for other ways to solve this problem, especially because the end result didn't land well for many players. Even though we had good intentions, we could have done better, and in the future we'll be even more conscious of these decisions." And this is all relatively reasonable. There's always going to be, when you design a character for a video game, there's always going to be that tension between how do you design the character and how do you design the character to look good from an in-game perspective. And you can see what Reeve means when he says this. The LoL King model viewer full screen isn't really working correctly, but this would be about the size of Kai'Sa's model in-game for most people. And if we give her her helmet on, which is fortunately an option, you can see it's kind of hard to appreciate that there's anything substantially human about her. She becomes very much, she looks like a Void champion entirely. There's really no way to tell how human she is, really. So, from a pure game design perspective, it makes a certain degree of sense to say, okay, where can we show some extra skin in order to let people know that this character is fundamentally a human, not fundamentally a Void creature. And from the game perspective, yeah, this makes perfect sense. So, insofar as that argument goes, I don't really have a problem with Reeve's reasoning. However, the issue with Kai'Sa isn't her neckline. That her neckline is not really the problem with the character design. In fact, I don't think the neckline is an issue at all. The issue is that Kai'Sa's character design, on a very fundamental level, does not look like what they say they want her to look like. This is Kai'Sa's base character design. It's her base splash art. Now, according to Riot themselves, to survive among predators, Kai'Sa became one. Stranded for years with no hope of rescue, Kai'Sa endured through sheer will and a symbiotic second skin adapted from a living Void creature. Now, the daughter of the Void emerges as an apex hunter torn between two worlds, the one that birthed her and the one that made her. So what Riot wants from Kai'Sa is a survivalist character, a Lara Croft type character, essentially. Someone who was thrust into a hostile environment, forced to survive on their wits and just the lucky acquisition of a Void suit alone, spending their entire lives, as the splash art shows us, on the run and fighting Void creatures. Essentially, a life spent in conflict and deprivation, just barely surviving on the skin of her teeth, going through sheer will, as indeed they say, through sheer will. But this is what Kai'Sa looks like. She doesn't look deprived. She doesn't look like she has been desperate at any point in her life. She has long, well-maintained L'Oreal perfect hair. She wears lipstick. She wears eyeliner and mascara. And she has meticulously well-maintained eyebrows. She has a body that looks like an Instagram supermodel. It doesn't look like a fighter or a survivor. It doesn't look like someone who's scrabbling to get by on whatever they can find in the hostile dimension of the Void. She looks entirely healthy, entirely comfortable, and not at all like a fighter or a survivor. This is the fundamental issue with Kai'Sa. The neckline isn't really the problem. The problem is that they designed her with giant-ass titties and a massive, thick butt to make her look appealing. That's the sexualization that's the problem with Kai'Sa. Let's put her helmet on for a sec. You take a look at this, and you're telling me that, oh, you know, if it wasn't for the cleavage we gave her, she wouldn't look sexy at all. She wouldn't look unnecessarily sexualized. She wouldn't look like she had been surviving, she hadn't been surviving for years in the void. She wouldn't, nothing would be wrong with her at all if only we haven't given her the cleavage. Really? That does not fly with me. And this has been my problem with Kai'Sa from day one, is that no part of her character design communicates the lore that Riot says they want her to have. They say they want a desperate, scrabbling survivor living on their wits and pure willpower, just barely outmaneuvering and out-managing their enemies. This is part of her kit design, by the way. Her kit in the game is all about risk and reward. Like, she dashes into danger with her shield, and then she has to kill everything around her, otherwise she just gets crushed and stomped on. Like, she has this constant risk-reward mechanic that should mean that she should have taken, like, some injuries, maybe. Like, she should have some scars or some battle damage, or she should be dirty from rolling around in the dirt, and like something should be there to tell us that this person isn't a comfortable, well-off supermodel who's, like, recovering from her next appearance in a Marvel movie, but someone who has spent their entire lives on the run and fighting. And nothing about her body design, nothing about her anatomy, and nothing about, indeed, her suit design. Like, you put her in a skin-tight lycra bodysuit that hugs every curve of her sumptuous form, and then you're gonna tell me that, oh, I mean, sexualization only happened when the cleavage came in. Like, we made a mistake with the cleavage. That's where the problem is. No, it's not. And I'm getting angry here, which I don't like to do, because anger kind of makes me unable to make a cogent point. So let me make some concrete suggestions for how Kai'Sa could be improved and also be shown to be more human. Because I think, fundamentally, they are correct that Kai'Sa, with her helmet on and everything going on here, she looks like a void creature. She doesn't look like a human. She looks like she's been taken over, in a very literal sense, by the void. So how do you solve that? Well, you start by giving her a body that actually reflects the kind of character that she's supposed to be. These are Olympic athletes. I believe they are runners. I'm not entirely sure. What you'll notice is that none of them look, in terms of their body type, like Kai'Sa. And this extends, here's a lineup of female Olympic athletes. These are the most physically fit people in the entire world. These are the peaks of human conditioning for their respective disciplines. There's a lot of different body types on display. There's a lot of different morphologies. There's a lot of different heights and sizes and builds. But what you'll notice is that none of them, 0.9% of them, look like this. None of them have that body. None of them have all that titty. None of them have all that ass, because having spent their entire lives, or at least certainly a very large part of it, training themselves to the peak of human fitness, focusing on development of muscles to do work, like, for instance, fighting, or trampolining, or triple jumping, or gymnastics, or weightlifting, or basketball, or whatever it may be, this is the result of that kind of life. When you live a life of hard exercise, constant expenditure of energy, constantly using your body to do shit, this is what you look like. So if you want to design a character who looks like they have spent their entire lives fighting, essentially, this is a lot closer to the kind of body that you should design in order to tell that story. If you want to tell the story of Kai'Sa as a fighter, as a survivor, as someone who, you know, lives on their strength and their will alone, on massive, you know, overwhelming determination to survive, then you look to people like this, who also live their lives on strength of will. It takes an immense amount of willpower to become an Olympic athlete like this. This is an incredibly difficult life. This is your reference. This is where you start. And then from there, you can add stuff. Like, again, I don't mind that she has titty. I really don't. I don't think that's necessarily an issue in and of itself. But the idea that it's only the cleavage that's the problem for Kai'Sa's character design is ludicrous to me. So we need to show some more skin on Kai'Sa. We need to show some more humanity on her. in order to properly communicate to the players that this is a human using a void suit as a tool. Well, one of the basics of human tool use is to use our hands, so one of my suggestions would be to essentially, instead of doing the cleavage thing down, then expose her shoulders, expose some of her back maybe, and give her more of an upper body that is entirely human, and focus instead on highlighting her hands, highlighting the gauntlets, giving her the sense that she's wielding weapons made from this void suit, that she's using them as tools. Like, tool use and human hands are intimately connected, and nothing's more human than tool use. It's one of the defining features of our species. That would be one of my suggestions. Another one of my suggestions would be, don't give her a skin-tight bodysuit. Like, if you give her a skin-tight bodysuit, what you're saying is that there is a deep and intimate contact between her and the thing that she's wearing. In this case, it's a void suit. So if you're telling the players there's a deep and intimate connection between this void thing, and the void is this massively powerful corrupting force in the League of Legends universe, and then you give her a skin-tight suit made of void, yeah, they're gonna make the connection, oh, it's like the Venom symbiote from Spider-Man, it's taking her over. So my suggestion instead of focusing on the skin-tight bodysuit thing, do more what you're doing with the legs. The legs, as you see, look more like a carapace, and this also fits into the rest of the Void aesthetic. The Void aesthetic is very much one that's kind of insectoid and bug-like, which does come across when she's wearing her helmet, where instead of giving her this skin-tight bodysuit, give her something that looks a little bit more like it's plates of Void armor that are sitting on top of her. This, of course, introduces another gameplay problem. Kai'Sa is a squishy. She's not tanky whatsoever. So you don't want to give her too much armor plating, because then she looks like she might be tanky or a fighter instead of being a squishy assassin who you can kill. You don't want to miscommunicate that. But there is a balance, I feel like, that can be struck where you give her something that's more like the plating on her legs or the plating on her that's on her arms already, that covers, you know, the parts of the body that do need to be covered up in order for the game to be rated for children, while at the same time emphasizing that she's wearing this thing as a suit. By the way, nothing says to me more that she is controlling this void creature, that she's wearing it as a tool, than turning it into a literal suit of armor. Like, that's the kind of thing, if you kill Kha'Zix and you wear his carapace as a suit of armor, nothing says more that the human is in control than, you know, I have skinned this thing and now I'm wearing it. Like, that's, again, that emphasizes her humanity rather than an intimate and very deep connection to whatever void thing she's wearing. I think there's a much better balance to be struck in that regard. And, you know, if you give her a body type like this, where there isn't that much cleavage to be had no matter how low you cut it, I think you also kind of avoid the problem, the appearance that what you want from this character design is for people to be sexually attracted to it. Like, this character design puts her feminine assets on display, which is fine. Again, that's not a bad thing. It's not evil or somehow morally wrong to do that. It's just, it doesn't fit the character that you say you want her to be. And that's the issue. Like, the cleavage is not the issue. The booty is not the issue. The issue is that there's a fundamental disconnect between the character you say you want to design and the character that you did design. So I'm gonna make that my last thoughts on the subject. So to recap, Kai'Sa doesn't look like a survivor. That's the problem. That's the problem. And it doesn't matter how much cleavage she has. It doesn't matter how skimpily she's attired or whatever. The fundamental issue is she needs to look like what you say she is. My suggestions: turn the void suit into more of a tool. Give her armor made from the void. Give her weapons made from the void. Emphasize her human control in that she's using these things rather than wearing these things. That would be my way to solve it. My name has been TBSky, and you should feel free to leave your comments down below. Suggestions for future videos are always welcome, because sometimes I run out of ideas. There's a like if you're so inclined. You can dislike it too. That is entirely okay. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for sticking through this somewhat angrier than I wanted it to be rant, and I shall see you in the next video.